Thank you so very much. It's a great opportunity to talk about an exciting evolution in our planet, and it's all new science.
It has to do really with human evolution. You link the science and biology to human evolution, which is not an easy task.
Well, it's so profoundly important because up to this point in time, we really bought into the belief that we're more or less victims of our heredity.
Okay.
We didn't pick the genes and we can't change the genes, and yet these genes control our characteristics. And it turns out the new science reveals this is a completely false assumption, and that we are so profoundly powerful because not only do we select and activate our genes, but we can modify our gene expression just by the way we respond to life and perceive the world.
So in understanding the new biology, let's learn a little bit about the old biology, or the existing, I should say, biology, science.
Okay, well, I mean, basically, we've all been programmed with the belief that this DNA, the story of DNA, and the whole history of DNA is a molecule that has the blueprints for our lives built into it, and that we receive this DNA at the moment of conception, and the rest of our life is really just an unfolding of the DNA. So in one sense, your life is essentially pre-programmed in that belief at the moment of conception. The rest of it is just unfolding the genes. That belief, of course, has led us into believing that we are powerless in controlling our own health.
That we are subject to our genetic upbringing or our genetic code.
Yes.
And that we have to express that, right?
Yeah, and then when we find, oh my goodness, maybe our genes aren't operating correctly, then all of a sudden we go outside of ourselves and say, I'm not powerful enough to take care of my health. I really have to seek a rescuer, someone who's going to guide me, help me, and bring my health in because I can't manage my own health. And that's the belief system we've been brought up with, but it's a totally incorrect assumption, and that's why I get so excited about talking about this new biology.
Okay, so let's learn a little bit about the function of the cell. We're going to empower ourselves right now to learn what's going on inside our own body.
Okay, well, let's first understand this. When we look in a mirror and see ourselves in the mirror and we see a single individual looking back, you look in the mirror and there's that beautiful Lisa looking back at yourself. We see ourselves as single individuals. That is a total misperception because in truth, we are actually made out of about 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. A human, by full definition, is a community of cells. So when I say Bruce, I'm really speaking for 50 trillion cells. So now you say, well, what about these cells inside your body? And I go, well, interestingly enough, if you look at the average cell in your body, you're going to find a very interesting fact, and that is this. Now, we look at a human, I say, well, in a textbook of human biology, I say, look at all the human systems: digestive, respiratory, excretory system, nervous system, reproductive system, etc., even immune system. And I say, what's interesting is that virtually every single cell in our body has every one of these systems in it. In other words, whatever we can do, we can only do it because cells are doing it, okay? Relevance. By definition, a cell is a miniature human. And that in our body is a community of 50 trillion cells. Our mind is more or less a government. Okay. If our government is working in harmony with the system, then the 50 trillion cells work together and create health and happiness in your body. If your government, meaning your mind, your thoughts and beliefs, are not in harmony with life or out of phase or out of sync with what's going on in the world, then by definition, it alters and fractures the community and we express disease and ill health. So basically, health is harmony in the system, and disease is when the community begins to break down. We've had a tendency in our history, blame the cells. And it turns out, oh my goodness, no, it's sort of recognizing, we have to recognize our responsibility in our thoughts. It's because the new science reveals that our thoughts actually control our genetics and our biology.
You're basically just describing our entire political environment, our entire environmental crisis that we're going on with right now, right? Exactly what you said, the microcosm versus the macrocosm.
It's not even versus it's the microcosm and the macrocosm are the same picture, and that's because there's an understanding that our world, nature, is built on something called fractal geometry. And you say, oh, what the heck is that? And I say, well, it's a mathematics that implies the existence of as above, so below. That is built into the mathematics. The significance is, that's why I say, if you see cells as miniature humans and you see how they work, Well, the information about how they work and how they communicate applies to us as humans because we're just a cell made by cells.
Well, let's take a look at this. Let's see what the cell looks like and the functions of it.
Well, interesting enough, we talk about single cells, and we talk about cells as like amoebas and stuff like that. And I say, well, what does a cell have? Well, it has all the functions. I said, but what creates the cell? And what creates a cell are things called proteins. Okay. And proteins are the building blocks. So if you want to build a house and you go to Home Depot and you got all these parts and you collect all these parts, you can build a house, and you can build many different versions. Proteins are similar to that. They're the building blocks that create the cell. Okay, so basically then your physical structure is determined by your proteins. Okay, and the proteins are created from blueprints. So the blueprints are called the DNA.
Okay, that's the genetic code.
That's the genetic code, and it gives us these proteins. Now, what's really interesting about the proteins is that proteins, each of the about 150,000 different proteins that make up a human, each protein has its own unique shape and its own unique structure. So as you assemble them, you get all the different variations of life from these proteins. Okay? But now comes, what's the secret of life? And the secret of life is that proteins are capable of changing their shape. Okay? So while we have 150,000 different proteins, each with their own shape, it turns out that when this protein responds to environmental information, environmental signals, what's going on in the environment, specific environmental signals can alter the shape of a protein. So what we talk about is A, there are proteins that make up the body, and B, there are signals that come from the environment. When a signal complements a protein, it causes the protein to change shape. Well, that's the secret of life.
And that's what we're taking a look at here?
Yeah, you're actually watching proteins responding and changing from shape A to shape B in response to environmental signals.
And how is this the secret of life?
Well, the secret of life is this. If proteins don't move, then you're essentially a physical body, a cadaver, more or less. Why? A body, a cadaver, a dead body's got all the proteins, got all the structure, but there's no life. I say, but where does life come from? Well, the fundamental definition of life is movement. I say, yeah, but where does movement come from? And then I go, proteins change their shape, which is movement. And what the cells do is use the movement and harness the movement to carry out the functions. Respiration, digestion, muscle contraction, for example, is changing the shape of the protein. So where does life come from? Signals engaging with the proteins, changing the shape, and then the shape movement.
So it's
used to do work.
Our responses to the environment.
To the environment.
Okay.
Right. If you cut off the response to the environment, so the cell doesn't respond to the environment, the proteins stop moving. A cell that cannot respond to the environment is almost like a person that's comatose. They're still alive, but there's no behavior.